Now, I know religious beliefs can be a divisive topic, but religion and music have gone hand to hand for many years, and the origin of music itself is actually quite tightly interwoven with religion. But modern contemporary religious music is often looked down upon by alternative and contemporary musician fans, and for good reason, which we'll get to later. Although one Australian band in particular who came from this sort of Hillsong origin has taken some of the elements of that music and used it to great success. And that band is Gang of Youths. Now, I know the title of this video could come across as a little misleading, and I want to point out that I don't believe that Gang of Youths are necessarily a Christian band, but they talk about the elements of beliefs and use similar emotions that Hillsong bands have used for many years to connect with their audience. So Gang of Youths formed in 2012 in Sydney, Australia, and their origins go back to a friendship that was created by lead singer and songwriter Dave Leopepe and guitarist Chochi Milani, who essentially met at church. As children, youth, and young men, they attended Hillsong together and bonded over their shared love of music and religious beliefs. They also met the other band members who would later join Gang of Youths through church meetings as well. I think it's also important to point out that Dave grew up in a religious household with a Samoan father and a Jewish mother, but he stated that he kind of felt disconnected from his Polynesian culture despite this. And I think it's a big part of inspiration for his musical experience. The band started to get together in the local music scene in Sydney in 2012 and played a lot of shows and started growing a strong but small following. They started getting played on a community radio station in New South Wales by the name of FBI Radio, which is kind of like a step below Triple J there, and eventually made their way onto the Triple J rotation, where they grew an even bigger audience. Their early music and Dave Leopepe's songwriting style was heavily inspired by a few things which I want to point out now. Number one, his musical influences, obviously. The biggest, in my opinion, that being Bruce Springsteen. The Gang of Youths songs that Dave wrote were big into storytelling and creating characters just like Bruce Springsteen would. They were also kind of big into that stadium rock aesthetic that a band maybe like Kings of Leon were comparable to. And of course, they used the emotion and provocation of feelings that Hillsong would use. They would often delve into subject matter like beliefs, existence of God, and what you're doing with your life in the lyrics of their songs. And they were able to do this in a way that was just simply what I would say satisfying to hear. And I'm gonna delve into that a bit later, so please stay tuned for how I think they did this very well towards the end of the video. Another big source of inspiration for Dave Leopepe was the relationship that he was going through with his then wife, who had been diagnosed with cancer and was going through chemotherapy. Now, Dave has said that he met this girl at church where he discovered that she did have cancer and was going to go through chemo, but they still decided to get married at the young age of 21 anyway. And while she was in hospital going through this treatment, he wrote a lot of music about the way he was feeling through this experience, and he also wrote songs to strive to inspire his wife who was going through chemotherapy. One noticeable song would be Overpass, which was the first song that they released on their YouTube channel, which is just simply Dave playing on his slightly out of tune guitar and just recorded himself in his room. And when that song got uploaded, people on the internet really liked it. They liked the emotion of it, and it was found by an A&R guy who helped them move their career forward as musicians. Sadly, their marriage broke up, and I think that the woman does live on to this day, but it came to be a huge source of inspiration for the Gang of Youths' early material. Another source of inspiration was Dave's mental health issues that he was going through during this time and post the marriage breakup. He actually attempted suicide at one point in his life and documented it in a poetic way through their hit song Magnolia.
There's no way tonight, as far as I know, that heaven would take me, so I'm sad.
Magnolia would really be the song that put them on the map here in the Australian music scene. It would hit the hottest 100 of 2015, and their debut album, which came out after it, called The Positions, did quite well around the country that year too, and Triple J gave it a lot of airtime. They were also nominated for an ARIA for Best Rock Album. In 2016, they released some material that didn't quite make the album on an EP that was called Let Me Be Clear, and the song Strange Diseases off it also made the hottest 100 of that year. But in 2017, the band went to another level as an Australian artist, and essentially became one of the biggest groups in this country that was making music. They released their second album called Go Farther in Lightness, which was an epic masterpiece. They really expanded their sound on this album with bigger, bombastic rock songs such as What Can I Do When the Fire Goes Out and Atlas Drowned, but also more orchestral work too. There's a few orchestral arrangements on this album with no singing involved, just the strings going beautifully. And then there's one song on here that meshes those two elements of orchestra and rock together beautifully, and that was Let Me Down Easy. Which turned out to be the biggest hit on the album, and it hit number 2 on the hottest 100 of that year, and the band ended up winning the ARIA for Album of the Year. Now 2018 would be the year that Gang of Youths went international. They had their first go at playing on US television on Seth Meyers. They played the NRL Grand Final.
The heart is the strongest muscle in your body.
And they sold out 20 shows across Australia, as well as supporting the Foo Fighters overseas. But in 2019, the band decided to permanently relocate to the UK. And due to this, it meant that founding member and great friend of Dave Laupepe, Chochi Milani, decided to leave the band to go home to focus on his family, of course staying in Australia. He was replaced by a guy called Tom Hobden, who's had experience playing with Mumford & Sons before, and the band started to work on their third album. Now the inspiration for this album though would come down to another extremely personal experience for Dave Laupepe, and that would be the death of his father. But the interesting thing about Dave's father passing would be that he would leave a lot of secrets with him in his grave, which Dave would discover over the coming months and years. While going through this grieving process and finding out all these random things that he never knew about his father and his family, Dave said that he roughly scrapped 2 albums before landing on the songs that he wanted to go with for the third Gang of Youths record. Now, some of the secrets that Dave discovered about his father after he died were that he was 10 years older than he claimed to be, that he wasn't half caste Samoan, he was full Samoan, that he had left children from another relationship that he had previously in Samoa to come to Australia, and that these children were still alive. Apparently Dave reconnected with some of these children and met up after the death of their father. So the first taste that they gave us of this third album would be The Angel of 8th Ave, which was a nice new single and did pretty well here in Australia. And then the third Gang of Youths album, Angel in Real Time, would finally be released in 2022 after going through major iteration changes and being scrapped multiple times. Initially, apparently they thought they were going to get it out in 2020. This album saw a lot of sonic experimentation and sounded quite different to their last 2. There was more use of drum machines and synths, but it still did have quite a rock feel to it. And Dave also brought in some Polynesian influence into this record as well, with a Polynesian choir singing some different languages in the background, and the lyrical content of course focused on these discoveries that he had made about his father after he died. And probably the best song that shows this would be Brothers, where Dave basically shares his life story in this beautiful poetic way, where it's just him and a piano explaining all these discoveries and where all of his siblings are at now in their lives.
Our father hid a lot of painful memories, a bunch of shit he never...
I have to say this is probably my favorite song on the album, even though it is so plain and simple. It's just so beautiful, and it is a great example of Dave's capacity to songwrite. He's just an incredible musician and credible artist. And of course, the album did pretty well here in Australia, charting well in the ARIA charts. Many of the songs reached Hottest 100s, and it also did pretty well in Europe and the UK too. So to this day, Gang of Youths are cemented as one of Australia's best and most popular alternative Australian rock bands. But what is it that makes them so special, and what makes them stand out? Well, it's something that I was talking about a bit before that I want to come back to, and it's, I think, their influence with modern contemporary Christian music. Now, like I was saying before, I don't necessarily believe that their music is Christian music, but it does take influence from some of the elements of Christian music, like evoking emotion and talking about beliefs, of course. But one reason why I in particular, and I think that a lot of people who are watching this video would agree with, is why I think Gang of Youths music works a lot better and I enjoy it more than Hillsong music, is that they're able to deliver a message in their songs that is more interesting. Now for me, I personally don't really get into that Hillsong sort of music, not necessarily because of the beliefs reason, but it's because of this reason. I find it to be too affirmative. Now what I mean by that is I personally think that music is more interesting when it allows the listener or consumer to go along with the story that's in it, and usually stories are better told when they get you to question things inside them. And I think Hillsong music is very much God exists, God is there, which is fine if they want to make music like that. It's just that I don't really think that that's interesting to listen to. Whereas with Gang of Youths, they're never necessarily saying that God is there or he isn't there. They're just asking the question. They're saying, is God there? And I think that that is better content for a song. For example, let's take one of the most well-known and famous songs ever, Bohemian Rhapsody, right? Now this is not necessarily a religious song either, but I think the opening lines of the song show what I'm talking about. Of course it says, is this the real life? Is this just fantasy? You know, what's that? They're questions. If they were to just say, this is real life, this is fantasy, it's a little bit too affirmative, it doesn't really fit as well, and it's not as engaging to listen to. There's other contemporary and alternative artists that do this sort of religious questioning really well in their music as well. For example, brand new, I really like the song that they put out, Jesus Christ, which I believe is one of the best, what I would kind of call religious songs ever written.
When Jesus Christ come alone again, so what did you do those 3 days you were there? 'Cause this problem's gonna last more than a week.
Also, a band by the name of Basement from the UK that have made an in-depth video about where I go into this subject of how they bring up religious beliefs and questioning in their songs, in particular in their album Beside Myself. But I like it when it's like this, when the person is going through a bit of like a religious journey and they're trying to discover what's right for them. I like listening to that journey as opposed to just being told that this is what I do believe and this is what I think is right and this is what I think will be best. It just doesn't work as well for me when I listen. And I would use the same framework for non-religious music or even music that is critical of religion. Like for example, a band who I really love is Violent Soho, and I don't personally get into their first album as much because I think it's a bit too much on that other side where it's just so critical of religion and beliefs all the time. It's too affirmative on the other side of saying that there is no God and God doesn't exist, and I just don't really get into that as much as a listener. And I would also point out that Dave's honesty in his lyrics is just extremely refreshing. And I think the reason why he doesn't put off people who are either Christian or atheist is because of this, that he's just honest. He tells you what he thinks. He says, you know what? I've got these things going on here. I've got these things going on there. I'm not sure what I think or understand about those things, but I'm just trying to work it out. And it's relatable for Christians and atheists alike. And he's also not afraid to shy away from his roots. There is a lot of criticism for Hillsong going around right now, but Dave's not really jumping on that train. He's more of a person who's willing to say, look, I'm really grateful for the upbringing that I had, and it's been a great source of inspiration for me, or at least that's what I feel like I'm hearing him say when he's in interviews. I think he's a positive person who's looking for ways that he can move forward with his life, and he wants to bring the listener on a journey with him, saying, let's all move forward together. Thanks again for watching this video. If you like hearing about Australian music, Australian bands, and all that sort of thing, please like and subscribe. I beg of you, it would be awesome. And then you can come back and watch more of my videos about this sort of stuff. Thanks. Bye.